Well, thank you for coming and joining the session. My name's Chris. I'm from the General Medical Council. If you joined the keynotes this morning, you will have seen my brief introduction to the General Medical Council. I'm now just going to run through some of our key pieces of guidance. We've got one person can't hear. Is everyone else still here? Okay, if so, it could be an issue with your speaker, perhaps. Yep, seems that everyone else can hear, so I think it must be individual issues. So I am correct in thinking you are all medical students, all fifth year medical students, is that right? Yep. So hopefully you will find this presentation useful in terms of learning it or recapping hopefully on some of the key areas of the GMC guidance, and then we're going to have a look at a few case studies. We'll get you to think about what you would do in different scenarios, and we'll probably talk through those using the chat function. So we're going to do a quick recap on our guidance. We're going to look at some raising concerns scenarios, and then if we have time, we will look at some social media scenarios, and then I'll just point you towards some of our online resources that you may find useful in preparation for your SJTs. So I won't go through each section of this because hopefully you saw this in the keynote this morning. If not, this is just a slide that demonstrates the key areas of responsibility for the GMC, and in particular for today we are focusing on the section at the top of the jigsaw, which is education and training. And obviously if you are all at medical school, then the GMC are responsible for setting the standards and the outcomes that your medical schools have to deliver to you as individual medical students. And at any point now or in the future, when you become doctors in training, if you have any concerns about the level of education and training that you are receiving, then the GMC are a good place to come to discuss those issues, to perhaps report those issues or to seek advice. You'll have my contact details at the end of the session, but if ever you need any advice, if you go onto the GMC website, there's a contact center, confidential helpline that you can use. So throughout your career, if you have concerns, then coming and discussing those with the GMC is a good first step. Or speaking to people face to face, if I'm out delivering sessions, myself or my colleagues may be able to help you in different scenarios. Hopefully you are aware of some of these pieces of guidance. Anybody want to have a guess how many pieces of guidance there are on the GMC website? Anyone want to guess in the chat box? Any of you been looking at all the guidance in preparation for your exams? No one wants to guess how many bits of guidance there are? So on this slide there are, how many is there? 17. So I think Cal has counted the number of pieces of guidance on this slide, which is always a good starting point, but 50 is not a bad guess. 80, a bit too much. 45, yeah, so we're there or thereabouts. There are actually 36 pieces of guidance on the GMC website, and they range from the most detailed booklets at the top of this slide, so good medical practice, hopefully you've all got an awareness of, but then going into some of the really detailed areas that you will need to be aware of moving forward, particularly around confidentiality and consent, raising concerns, but then also areas that you need to be aware of as you progress through your career, such as leadership and management and your role in that at any stage of your career. So even now as fifth year medical students, you perhaps don't see yourselves as having a role in terms of leadership and management, but already you will have, students below you who are looking up to you as role models and seeking guidance from you. And as you progress through your career, that will always be the case. So even as an F1 doctor, you will have medical students looking up to you, seeking guidance off you. And it's important that you bear that in mind as you progress through your career. And then at the bottom of the slide, we've got the more supportive or supplementary pieces of guidance, as we call them. And these are much more to the point. So these are usually 1 or 2 pages of A4. Don't go into great detail as the booklets do, but they focus more on specific areas that we've received queries or that there have been issues around. So you can see the one on the left-hand side there, acting as a witness in legal proceedings. So that is a very specific piece of guidance that you may find useful in a specific situation. And then looking at things such as maintaining a professional boundary between you and a patient. And then on the far side, things such as doctors' use of social media. So these are much more sort of current, up-to-date pieces of guidance that have been produced in the last few years. So this is what we think a good doctor looks like. So does anybody disagree with any of these points, or is there anything missing from this slide that might surprise you? So we expect that a good doctor puts patient care first, and that is one of the first points of good medical practice. As you would expect, we expect that all good doctors are competent and keep their knowledge and skills up to date. We would expect good doctors to work well with patients and colleagues, to take prompt action regarding patient safety, and then to be honest, trustworthy, and act with integrity and within the law. So quite a high level view of a good doctor, but is there anything there that stands out for you? Anything that you think is missing? Anything that you think would be difficult to do in the future to ensure that you are a good doctor? Again, you use the chat box to raise any points. Yep. So Jackie, integrity is definitely important, and would absolutely agree with that, and something that helps you build that relationship with all the patients that you are treating is acting with integrity. Sadia, hopefully that's how you pronounce it. Apologies if that's pronounced wrong, but a really good point, knowing your own abilities, so understanding your strengths and weakness. I think that's a really good point for you guys at this stage of your career. As you move forward as 5th year medical students, you'll be going on placements. You'll probably feel quite confident in your own ability, and you will want to be getting involved more and more. Then once you become an F1, I'm sure you'll all be very keen and wanting to develop as quickly as you can. But it's really important that you do know your own capabilities and your own level of competence. And then once you know that, then exactly as Daisy has said there, is knowing those limits and also being comfortable and confident to share that with other people, because I'm sure throughout your careers moving forward, you will get approached by colleagues, maybe nursing colleagues, maybe more senior doctors, who will be asking you to carry out tasks for them, asking you will be delegating work for you. And it's really important at this early stage of your career that you feel comfortable and confident enough to say, actually, what you're asking me to do goes beyond what I am comfortable with and goes beyond what I am confident with in terms of my own levels of ability and competence. So really important that you do have that understanding of your own ability. We've got teamwork and communication, leadership, good problem solving and critical thinking. Good point there, for an interesting point from Laura. So good insight into your own health, I think, is a really interesting point, and and something to really be aware of again as you progress through your career, and particularly the difficult times that we have been through during the last 4 months, and who knows what the future holds in terms of coronavirus. But I imagine for all doctors, for some of you who may have been volunteering, it's been an extremely stressful time, and it's important that you have that insight into your own health. And I always say when I meet with groups of doctors that actually doctors are probably the worst patients, because you are the last people to go and make an appointment with a doctor or get yourself checked out. So it's important that throughout your career you look after yourselves and put your own health and well-being first and foremost. Decision maker, community leader, good points throughout your career. Throughout your career, is there support to help you overcome if they could signify your ability to be a doctor? So, Catherine, again, a good question, and I think that support should initially come from, at this stage of your career, from your medical school. So if you feel that you need to improve in some areas, your medical school should be supporting you through that. But once you start work as a doctor, you'll be on the foundation training program initially, and they should have processes in place to support you, to help you develop your own weaknesses. As a trainee doctor, there'll be lots of training and support and access to educational tools available. And as you develop throughout your career, it's about recognizing your own areas of strength and weakness, and maybe seeking to develop in those areas, or finding mentors and people who can support you to develop through your career. Yep, really good point from Dia there, being able to deal with instances of uncertainty. And I think, again, kind of links into understanding your level of competence and your ability, that there will be times throughout your career, whether it's in your first week as an F1, whether it's when you're on placement in 5th year, whether it's in 20 years time when you're working as a consultant, and you've got all the experience in the world, you will always have times when there is a level of uncertainty, and maybe you're unsure what a diagnosis is, maybe you're unsure what the best care plan and treatment available is. And again, something I would repeat to all groups of doctors I meet with, that never be embarrassed or ashamed by having a level of uncertainty. I actually think it's a real sign of confidence in your own ability to be able to ask questions and seek support from your colleagues, no matter what level you are working at. And again, that's something I would keep with you as you progress through your career. Never be afraid to ask a question in any situation, no matter how stupid you may feel that question is. It's much more important that you ask that question to clear up any uncertainty you may have, and make sure that the patient or the process that you are involved in is carried out as it should be. It's really good points there about what you consider a good doctor, and I would agree with all of them, and can go into great detail about lots of them. So we talked about good medical practice earlier as being the key piece of GMC guidance, and for you guys as medical students, we've got achieving good medical practices at this stage of your career being the key piece of guidance. And really this feeds in to good medical practice. So this guidance is about preparing you as medical students for the expectations and the standards that we expect of doctors. So to make sure you have a really good understanding if you have a good understanding of this piece of guidance, that will stand you in good stead for starting off your career as a doctor, hopefully in 12 months time or so. And the key domains link directly to good medical practice, which then links into things such as appraisal and revalidation moving forward in your career. But we've got knowledge, skills, and performance, which I think we would expect to be, a cornerstone for any doctor. We've got safety and quality, And then two areas that I think are sometimes a bit more surprising, which is about maintaining trust and communication, partnership, and teamwork. And I think they link into a lot of the points that you've just raised about what we think makes a good doctor. A lot of that is about ensuring that your team and your patients have a level of trust in you, and that you're able to communicate and work with others in the best way possible. So if you've not seen this guidance before, then a good starting point would be to download this from the GMC website, have a read of it. If you are already aware of it, then just keep your understanding of this up to date. Make sure you know what the key domains are in terms of achieving good medical practice. So we'll look at a few scenarios now. So usually I get you to work in groups for this. This is the first time we have run something like this virtually, so we will see how it goes. It's much easier when things are face to face, but I'm going to look at a scenario from the GMC website. So Dr. Sharma has recently been appointed a consultant physician based in the stroke unit of the General District Hospital, where she was previously a specialist registrar. She witnesses a number of incidents on the unit where patients are not receiving basic care and has to decide how to act. As she is leaving the ward on her way to see another patient, she notices that Mr. Johnson, who was transferred from intensive care 2 days ago, hasn't touched his food or drink, and she stops to talk to him. So what do we think Dr. Sharma should do in this situation? If you were in Dr. Sharma's shoes, how would you approach this situation? And I'll just put the scenario back up if you need to read through that again. So I'll give you a few options here. So we've got speak to the nurse in charge about his food and fluid intake. Yep. So speak to the patient as a good starting point. Why is he not touching his food? How is he feeling? And then speak to the nurse in charge about the food and fluid intake. Yep. Could be asking questions about is he not able to feed himself? Is there some problems there? So what are we going to do here? Which option are we going to go for? Are we going to go for A, ask Mr. Johnson what help he needs to eat his breakfast and feed him herself, report the problem to the nurse in charge, reassure Mr. Johnson that the nursing staff will come and help him and leave the ward, planning on going back to check later, find a nurse and ask them to help Mr. Johnson eat his breakfast. So we've got Anthony's going for C, got Daisy, Dia, Laura going for A. So most people are starting off with A. So we're asking Mr. Johnson what help he needs to eat his breakfast and feed him. And you're basically taking responsibility in that situation. So that's a really good starting point. If you see any scenario, even now, as a fifth year medical student, if you see a patient and you have concerns and you think that action needs to be taken, then it's important that you take responsibility, and whether that's be approaching the patient and asking them directly, or whether that be approaching a colleague and seeking support from them, making sure that you put patient safety first. And that is exactly what good medical practice says. So making the care of your patient your first concern. So that links straight into exactly as a majority of you have answered there. Ask Mr. Johnson what help he needs to eat his breakfast and feed himself. So you are taking responsibility first and foremost, and you are making the care of your patient your first concern. I'm sure in this situation the doctor is very busy, needs to get back to their own duties, but they've seen a patient who they've got concerns about, and they are taking responsibility for that and going and trying putting things right themselves. And then we've got our raising and acting on concerns guidance. So it's really important that as doctors in the future, that if you have concerns, that you not only try and act on them if possible, but that you also raise them within the areas that you are working. And whenever I meet with foundation doctors, I always talk about them being, a really important set of eyes and ears for any organization. And you will be in that position, very soon. Once you start your foundation program, you'll be rotating around different areas of hospitals, working in different departments, working with different colleagues, and you are really in a key position to see where things work well, where we've got areas of good practice, or perhaps where we've got things that aren't working well, and maybe we've got areas of concern. And although you would be, the most junior doctor perhaps on the ward, actually you're able to compare and contrast how things are working in any different environment. And this is what the guidance says about all doctors having a duty to raise concerns where they believe that patient safety or care is being compromised. So at any point in your career, if you are concerned about patient safety and you feel that it's being compromised, then you have a duty as a doctor to raise that concern and, where possible, to act on that concern. And there's lots of different guidance available on the GMC website to support you in that. So there's a flow chart. So when you are new in your career, if you are unsure what to do in any situation, then you can have a look at the flow chart, and it talks you through, yes and no answers. Who should you report things to? Where should you go with things if you need to? There's a confidential helpline available, so you can speak to the GMC totally confidentially. You can ask us for help and advice, and we will be able to tell you what to do in any given situation if you're unsure what to do with your concerns. And then there are more case studies available on the website, and I'll direct you to those at the end of the presentation. So as medical students, you will be on placements, and you may come across concerns. You may see areas of practice where you think actually you're not sure whether things are being done as they should be. You've got concerns about patient safety. And it's absolutely key for you as medical students, if you do have those concerns, that you do raise them. And first and foremost, there should be processes in place through your medical school to help you and support you to raise those concerns. So make sure you're aware of those protocols and, processes when you are on placement, and make sure you are reporting issues if you feel the need to do so. If you're unsure what to do, make sure you seek appropriate advice and support. So as I've said, using the GMC confidential helpline, speaking to colleagues, maybe speaking to your peers or senior colleagues and seeking advice if that's appropriate. And always keep a record of any concerns that you've raised and any actions that you've taken, because if you report something to somebody more senior because it's more appropriate for them to resolve the issues, and then further down the line action is not taken, then you want to have a record of you reporting that, because that will support you in the future. So we're going to look at a second scenario now. We've got 10 minutes left, so should be able to finish things up. So this is a scenario now where we've got Jasdeep is a conscientious student and is keen to impress his supervisors. He is concerned when the doctor supervising him arrives to work apparently still intoxicated from the night before. Jasdeep shares his concerns with a friend from the medical school. what would you do in this situation if you're the friend that Jasdeep has confided in and looking for advice from? What advice would you give to Jasdeep in this situation? Would you suggest that he have a quiet word with the doctor and explain his concerns? Would you suggest actually let's not say anything, let's hope this is a one-off incident and it doesn't happen again? Or would you suggest reporting this incident to the medical school? So who's going to go with A, B, or C, or a combination of them all? So Linda's gone for A. Most people A. We've got an A and then a C there. Yep, so it's extremely positive that nobody's going for option B in this situation, which would be absolutely the wrong thing to do. So even if you think that it may be a one-off, if you think that the senior colleagues just had a few too many red wines the night before, and maybe it's not even likely to affect their work. Maybe it's just that the smelling of alcohol is still important that you do raise and that you act on those concerns. And in this situation, we would be looking for either A, C, or a combination of both. So ideally, in most situations, if you have concerns about a colleague, the most appropriate thing to do is to discuss the concerns directly with that colleague and to ask them, is everything okay? Do they know that they're smelling of alcohol? Do they recognize that they could be intoxicated and maybe it's best for them to not be in work today? But option A, I always think is much easier said than done, because I certainly know from my own perspective, if I was working with somebody much more senior than myself and they turned up and they were smelling of alcohol and I thought they were probably under the influence, quite a daunting prospect to raise that directly with the individual. So although A is an option we would be looking to take, I recognize that's not always going to be possible, because it takes a very strong person to be able to go and raise an issue like that with somebody more senior than themselves. But if you do feel comfortable and confident doing that, then speaking directly to the colleague would be a good starting point. Even if you do go with A and you do speak to your colleague, then we also want to be following option C as well. So you want to be reporting it to your medical school so they know that you've raised those concerns. And again, as we looked on the slide earlier, that's supporting you. So if anything was to happen, if this doctor was to make a mistake, there's a record that you have reported it and that you have tried to raise that issue, and the medical school are aware of it, and then the medical school will have a process in place of dealing with that with the trust or the GP practice, wherever it might be that you're on placement. They would have a process in place for managing those concerns that you raise. So quick question there. So would you rank A first and then C? So being totally honest, it depends how comfortable you feel in that situation. As long as you do both of them, it might be that actually at first you report it to your medical school. So you go with option C and you give your medical school a call perhaps, and you share your concerns. And it might be at that point you feel more comfortable, and then you go back and you have a word with your colleague and you talk to them individually. Might be that actually you've got a really good relationship with this colleague, you get on well with them, and you are happy to approach them and have this open and honest conversation. So you might do that straight away as soon as they walk onto ward and you smell the alcohol on them. It might be that actually you feel confident enough just to say, can I have a quick word with you at that point? And you raise that straight away, but that's not always going to be the easiest thing to do. So there's no sort of right or wrong order here. So concern is that in SJ2 we're given these and we need to rank them in order of what is the most appropriate action. So I would suggest A is the most appropriate action, because the approach to take is thinking from a patient safety point of view. So if you smell alcohol on a colleague, if your first port of call is to go and report it for the medical school, that probably means that you are leaving the ward. It probably means that you are having to leave the colleague who you have these concerns about. And that's likely to mean the colleague's either starting a ward round or going into surgery, treating patients when actually you've got concerns. So, the first port of call would be, can I raise this issue straight away by having a word with them, because we are thinking about patient safety and we don't want this colleague to be treating any patients while you've got these concerns, and then going on to make sure that it is reported to the medical school because it's important that those concerns are raised. We're going to do a quick ranking exercise, but we've only got a couple of minutes left. I'm not sure if I'll make sure the slides are available so you can look at them in your own time, hopefully. We're also going to do some professional boundaries stuff. What I would say in terms of social media and professional boundaries, do any of you Google yourselves on a regular basis? Sounds like quite a strange question. Have you ever Googled yourself? Trisha says yes. It's always good when people, yep, definitely. So a really good piece of advice in terms of your own professionalism and social media is to regularly Google your names. And it sounds very strange. And when I suggest it to doctors, sometimes I get some odd looks, but actually I did this. I talked about this with a group of F2s in about this time last year it was, and we were talking about social media, and I asked if they'd ever Googled themselves, and one doctor looked at me like, like I was a bit mad, really. And I asked her to Google herself. She went on her phone, she Googled her name, and she found reams and reams of information about herself that was available online that she had no idea about. When she was younger, she was quite a high level athlete and held records at a local running club. And there's loads of information came up, loads of articles about this doctor. And it's a really good way of knowing what information is available about you, which your patients could be aware of. Unfortunately, in modern society, I think patients now will be looking for information about you as treating doctors in the future. So it's important that you have that awareness of what information they may already know about you. Also, really good way of protecting your own privacy in terms of your social media. So if you're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever other types of social media there are out there, it's important that they remain private and that patients don't have access to those. So Googling yourself, make sure that Facebook haven't all of a sudden changed the privacy settings and now your patients can see your holiday pictures from last summer, and you don't want patients asking you those sort of inappropriate questions when you are meeting with them. So if you haven't done it previously, Google yourself sort of a couple of times a year and make sure that there is not too much information about you available on the internet. To help you prepare for practice, there is our ethical guidance hub. So I would point you in this direction to learn more about our guidance and look at different scenarios. Can really help you with the prep for your SJTs. So you can go on, as we've just done there, really looking at different case studies. Some of them will be videos, some of them will be ones that we've just looked at where you're reading the scenario, and it gives you decision-making tools. So you have to decide what you would do in each scenario. It will tell you whether you've made the right decision or not. So go and have a look on the GMC website, test your learning and understanding of the different pieces of guidance that we've got in place. And we are 1 minute over. I don't want to keep you much longer, but I am available. If anyone has any questions, please do pop them into the chat box. Hope that you've found that useful. I'm available all day, so if you want to come and drop into the GMC booth, then I will be available to ask questions. So quick question from Trisha there. Are there any textbooks by the GMC? So the GMC we haven't produced any textbooks. We don't have textbooks that are approved by us. If you go onto the GMC website, you can access all of the guidance that we have available, and in a way that would be the textbooks, would be the guidance, but it's all available on the GMC website. So yeah, don't be misled into thinking that books may or may not have been approved by the GMC, because we wouldn't be approving certain textbooks. It would all be available on the website for free.